This afternoon, I have the honor and privilege of introducing Tadodaho Sidney Hill. Tadodaho Sidney Hill is from the Onondaga Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. He is born to the Eel clan. His mother is Phoebe Hill, and Sid was raised in the traditional ways of the Longhouse. Sid attended Syracuse University and then pursued a career in construction and was a member of the Iron Workers Union. He's always been an advocate for human rights and the environment. He's a lifelong lacrosse player and is one of the founding members of the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team. In 1996, Sid was chosen to warm the seat of the title of Tadodaho and was condoled in 2002. Now, this title is unique because it is a lifetime position and is the only title chosen by the other 49 chiefs of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Today, Sid focuses his attention on the many issues facing the nation and the environment. Some of the projects he is currently working on include taking a look at international indigenous issues, and I had the privilege of meeting Sid for the first time about 20 years ago at an international border security conference that's held in Cornwall, Ontario, and we talked about ways in which to help preserve Haudenosaunee border crossing rights that are preserved by treaty and statute here in the United States. Sid also works on issues pertinent to the doctrine of discovery, hydrofracking, and commerce, to name a few. He also deals with many of the other issues that are facing the Haudenosaunee people. One of the most important responsibilities that he is working on is ensuring that we continue our traditional teachings. Sid takes part in discussions at the United Nations concerning the rights of indigenous peoples around the world. He has had the honor of opening the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues at the United Nations for over 10 years. He takes his responsibility very seriously and has a deep understanding of how decisions and actions impact the Haudenosaunee people. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Tadodaho Sid Hill. Thank you.
Just thank you that you're well, everyone here. Listening to all these speakers here, it's I just jot down all the things that I could comment on, all the issues that we face today. Federal recognition, and I sometimes I just see the irony of all these, some of the things that we discuss. We be a federally recognized nation, Indians, tribes, and it's like, I ain't gonna say it, but that's very, very nice of you. But because it was us when the newly formed U.S. became the nation, it was those treaties that they made with us as nations that recognized them as a nation. So now here we are. They switched that around, and we're going to recognize you or not recognize you. So it's funny how times change and how history evolves. We're always talking, and I talked about, someone mentioned about the boundaries of our people, not having boundaries, And I just look at our Haudenosaunee, and I see our people, or the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca were separated. We're not very far away in our main villages, but I think Oren mentioned our treaty with ourselves was with this one bull, where we didn't have line boundaries that I think the only thing that separated us was maybe our language. And it was, the treaty was that no one owns the woods. So it was everyone's. So there was no line boundary between, say, us and the Oneida, which we were next to. But our languages were different, similar but different. Iroquois, they call them. And and I was up in Ottawa one time, and I went up to traveling up there, and I had to cross the border to get to the event. And so they were asking me, and I showed them my passport. We have our own passport for the Haudenosaunee people, and I think the Canadian government said this was a fantasy document, and really kind of took me back. A fantasy document. We're just trying to make things better for our people as we travel on your so-called borders. So I mentioned to the people, I says, well, it's funny, our white brother, he likes to draw lines, and it's pretty amazing because he can even draw a line in the water. And so if you look at a map, you'll see a line drawn in the water. Somehow that's a boundary there. Half of Ontario's here and half the other Ontario's on this side. And we're right in the middle, there's the US-Canadian border. So I just thought that was kind of funny. But we're, just like I say, just hearing all these issues. Disbursement, when we lost our lands, having to travel. We were supposed to be in Kansas also. We were on that Indian Act or whatever it was back when they were supposed to leave, and some of our people went out there. What the story that I heard was that they went out there to look at this place, and they came back. They said, well, we can't really go out there because we don't know the people who are living there that are giving up their lands. We don't know who they are. And for some reason, our leadership, well, no, we're not going to go. So I don't know how that happened, but some of us managed to stay at Onondaga, and we're just a small community, probably about 2,000. But but our people moved with other nations, went to the cities, as they go and went to jobs. So we have a small community back home that we still carry on our ceremonies, and have our language, and it's pretty amazing. I see John and John Block, and I see him in some of our ceremonies going around. All the young people, they're just picking us up. And I look at the language part of it. The language in the boarding schools, where they were trying to pretty much destroy the language, eliminate the language from our people. And at the same time, they asked our people to be code talkers. So I don't, what is it? What is it? Do you want us to speak, or don't you want us to speak? Because we had code talkers, Mohawk code talkers, and Seneca, and all our Haudenosaunee, our servicemen went into the service, and they were asked to use their language in these wars. And it's like, it just didn't make much sense to me. A lot of the things that's happened to us. It's just we talk about boarding schools and the effect of us. And my mother and father both went to boarding schools. My mother went to Quaker, what they call the Quaker Bridge, and it's right down near Allegheny. She's always talked about this. My father went to the Thomas Indian School, and that was in Cattaraugus, another Seneca. It was out towards the west in Buffalo area. And And I look back and I think about my father, a great athlete, one of the greatest athletes on the nation. And he went there as a child, came back, went into the service, And Oren tells me how he was a boxer. He was a Pacific champion in boxing. And I look back and I see how much of our people went into the service. Well, why is that? Why did our people have the highest percentage of any ethnic group going into the service? But if you're brought up in a boarding school, it's a military style school. So they were more, I kind of think that he was more comfortable going into the service and being told what to do, and could relate better to that, and then coming back to the territories, to the reservations. Well, my father ended up an alcoholic, died an alcoholic. So, but he also never talked about the boarding schools. He never talked about the war, all these things. And it wasn't until this reporter went to talk to him about the war, and I talked to this reporter, and he said, well, he never talks about it, I don't know. So he was in World War II, and so he told the reporter, he says, well, I'm not supposed to talk about this. I'm not supposed to tell you about anything about the war. And that's what they were told. So, I just wonder about those things. Why our people would go into the services. It's such a high percentage of our people. In our community during World War II, it was just about empty of men, just old men and young boys that were left in the community, and came back pretty much damaged, but it was just come back and go back to work, go to work. I grew up, so my mother also went to the boarding school. She came back, and some of the effects there, so we learned how to make a bid, a military style. That's what I remember. To make a military style bid, it had to be so perfect and straight, and that's what I learned. And certain things, and I talked to other people, and they couldn't understand why their parents were coming back, and they had to do it this way. You had to do it this way. There was a certain way you had to cut your butter. And I didn't know, but I talked to someone else. That's what my mother told us too, You had to cut your butter a certain way. And it was like, oh, geez. So these effects and the effects of boarding schools. And yeah, we didn't know. I didn't go to boarding school, but I certainly was affected by it. And I didn't even know it. So all these things. We had a big march, and when we were talking about the boarding schools, and kids want to do this march, and went downtown, and I talked about the boarding school. So I'm having a hard time here. I went down there. I was asked to speak there, and I broke down. Because there was a march. There was about 200 or 300 people going down from our nation to Syracuse, and I talked about the boarding schools, and I told them how I'm still having a hard time with this. My mother never hugged me. So they come back out of these places, and with all that damage that they went through. So even though we didn't go through the boarding schools, we were affected by them generationally. And it's just something that with all the diseases and the wars and the displacement of our people, I think the boarding schools I'm sorry, it's just it had a spiritual effect on us, and that's what we're dealing with now. How, and our people are they're hurt, they're damaged, and then when we still try to keep our ceremonies going, keep that fight going, and then we have to encourage our children to give them hope. We have to give them hope, and that's what I talk to them about. Things that are happening today. We have the tree of peace, and we do this, and we educate people about we're still here and all this, and it's like we just got to keep doing it. We got to keep doing it for their sake. And now we have climate change. Our prophecies have told us about this. And like I said, what's going on today, we're in a community now where we have a number of people who talk about those things that our last message from the Creator was 224 years ago, Handsome Lake. So that's being done now, and it's being done at the Allegheny Reservation. And we go around and continue to educate our people. So we were told about these things that were going to change, things we're going to see, and it's happening now. It's happening now. But you have these fires, and I said there would be so much. One of the things where there would be so much war that there would just be ashes falling, all over the world. And obviously, you just look at the news today, and that's what I think about when I all those prophecies that we've been told and been hearing since a child. And so now I would just go to the news today, and you see what's going on out in the world, just fighting amongst each other, fighting to be recognized, fighting to be I don't know, fighting to be at peace. I don't know, but I think that this is the things like this where people can talk about things and educate. We talk about the boarding schools, that was to eliminate us. But also in the public schools, they've eliminated the history of our people. And that's, we can't, we need to learn from history. We need to know those things. Everything is not good. There's some bad times, but you need to know about it so it doesn't happen again. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. But we see around the world how everyone is fighting, all kinds of conflict. So that was just some of the things that I got from all these speakers. There's so much I could comment on more, but when we talk about the government that we're dealing with now, in our form of government, the Haudenosaunee, we have kind of everything's balanced. So the clan mothers, they pick the leaders. We're matrilineal, so Like John said, his daughter's Mohawk because his mother's Mohawk. He's Seneca, and that's how it works with us. We were talking about it earlier, and it says, it didn't really matter what your father was. It's who your mother was, and that's what you went by. But there was always a balance there. There was a balance in our structure. When the peacemaker, when we planted the tree of peace with the eagle on top and the four roots going out, all those instructions were given to those leaders, and he was set up how we would sit. So when we do sit in council, we have the Onondagas in the middle there, Senecas and Mohawks on this side, Cayugas, and Oneidas on this side, and since the Tuscaroras came in, they sit with them. So when the subject comes up, we throw it over. You might hear it in the Congress and when you're dealing it. We call this the well. Put it into the well. And the wells, when they discuss this, when they come to an agreement between the two sides, and then they'll throw it back to us, to Onondagas, the firekeepers, and we either just sanction. We hear their arguments, and we hear their discussion, and pretty much sanction what's being told. So there's your three-body system that the U.S. government copied some of our ways. And talk about this balance, and also our clans are split up. Our clans are also split up. So there's certain clans on this side and certain clans on this side. But it's to help each other. So when we lose someone, if someone has some bad luck or has some medicine, it's the other side of the clan, the other side of the house. It's their job to help them get through whatever their medicine is. If they've lost somebody, it's the other side that's supposed to help. So they can do their grieving or get well to whatever. So there's that balance. So whatever side it is, when we lose a chief, we have the Onondagas, Mohawks, and Senecas are called the elder brothers. Oneidas, Cayugas, Tuscaroras are called the younger brothers. So if the elder brothers' leaders fall, it's up to the younger brothers to do most of the speaking and taking care of things. So there's always that balance of helping each other. So it helps you get through these things. We have songs, we have speeches, we have these things that help you get through these bad times. And it just, I don't know, it's just something I grew up with, and it just makes a lot of sense to how it should be, how we should be helping each other. I don't know, I just feel I had to talk about some of these things. Talk about the economy and how we're struggling to provide for our people, and so you got to have these money-making things. And he says, well, our economy was our land. Our land was the economy. We didn't have to go out and work and buy something. We went out there and it was there for us to use. Whether it was the trees, the birds, the animals, the water, the fish, everything was there. So if you call, it's hard to say it's our economy, but that's what was there for us. And each nation had their area where there are ceremonies connected with the area around you. So whether it's going from all the way up to Alaska down to to Florida, all those people chose to stay there, but had to work with the environment in order to survive. So but everything was there. We always talk about it. We give thanks for all the things that the Creator put down for us. and those are the things that are there for us to use. And now we're in a situation where we've lost the land, we've lost our economy, and now we have to find a new way to take care of our people. It's something that I don't know what's our choice. What choice do we have? We have to. And there's a word we use. There's a word we use. I think I mentioned it the other day. It's ongoya tukun sota, and it means survivors. We're survivors, and we shouldn't be survivors. You know, we shouldn't have to survive. Yes, to take care of us, but survivor is like you've gone through something, and if you made it through a tough time, you know. But it's just being, I don't know if that's the term we use now, because we've survived all the things we've had to go through. But, you know, the word we call the Haudenosaunee, most of the language there is we call ourselves Umwahumi. And that just means we're real people. Very simple, we're real people. That's what we call ourselves. And, so we have responsibility. You know, everybody has a responsibility. If you're a leader, you have a responsibility. If you're a family person, then you have a responsibility to that family to bring them up in a good way, to provide for them, and make sure they're fed, clothed, sheltered. And that's the responsibility of being a non-leader. So we look at the women with all the responsibilities, and I look at like the feminist movement. It says, well, looking for equality. And I says, there is no equality. You know, the man can never equal what the woman has to do. You know, she has so much responsibility. I always say, if it was up to the men to bear children, we would have been extinct a long time ago. Different kind of strength there, you know. And our women pick our leaders, because they're the ones who bring them up. They bring them up, and they know if this person has certain qualities. They watch them, and that's their duty, to watch all the time for these leaders. And they pick women leaders and they pick men leaders. And that's their duty, to make sure that that person's going to be the right person to lead our people and make decisions. So and every nation has these structure that works, and it works for them, and it's working for thousands of years. It worked for them, and it's all just common sense, you know, things you have to do. So it just all these things I've been hearing from these wonderful speakers, and all the work you do, and all the things that this university has done. It's we need to talk about these things. You know, we need to, and we're looking for answers. You know, and sometimes we don't have the answers sometimes, and we have to figure out what's the best way to go. But young people are here. You're going to face a lot of things that we've prophesied, things that are going to happen when the Creator does things differently. That's what we were told, and we're going to see different things. And some of those things we're seeing, and some we haven't yet. But we do have to keep that encouragement to our young people, so they don't give up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tadodaho. I know it's obviously very difficult to talk about certain things that have caused so much pain for you and many other people. So thank you for sharing those personal feelings and perspectives with us. We do have a question online.
Thank you very much. One question from the virtual audience. Can you tell us the difference between the sovereignty of the Haudenosaunee and being federally recognized?
Well, yeah, we talked about that. Being sovereign is taking care of yourself. We always talk about sovereignty, but when you put a person in a different land, or you shrink their environment, or what they can use, hard for them to be sovereign. We talk about sovereignty in there. We talk mostly about just doing things for ourselves. But there was an old person was asked that, what's sovereignty? What does sovereignty mean to you? Some non-native person was talking to one of our elder chiefs, and he went to his back room or someplace and came back, and he put out his hand, and he had a handful of corn. He says, that's sovereignty. When you can feed your people, and you can take care of them, and you can make the right decisions without someone over you telling you, I know what's good for you. We know what's good for us. We don't have to have someone to tell us what's good for us. We've been here, and so it's a word that people use a lot. You're sovereign, and we're doing that. So the we don't receive federal funds from the U.S. government. One of our little chiefs again has always said that. I was trying to help us, and I said, well, and I think it's a lot to do with the control. Okay, if I give you money, but you have to put it this way. You can't use it here. You can't use it there. So he said, you can come into our longhouse and you can dump a wheelbarrow full of money and leave. We'll take the money, because they always have these. Oh, you got to use it for this. You got to use it for that. Got to be accounted for. So that's been kind of our policy about receiving federal funds.
One additional question. What are your thoughts on the lawsuit filed by the Native American Guardian Association wanting the Washington Commanders to change the name and logo back to honor Blackfoot Chief Two Gun Whitecalf?
Well, I don't know about that certain particular one, but just mascots in general. I guess they say we're honoring us. I don't know. I look at the Cleveland Indians emblem there, and it's not very flattering. It's a caricature. I don't know if they still do it. I'm not sure. But I always use the term, as far as mascots and that, and they say, well, lions, tigers, bears, and Indians, and we put us in that category. So it's I guess it's meant to honor or somehow, but I think things are changing. It's changing. They don't seem to get it unless you affect their pocketbook. And when it's money involved, then maybe things start changing. Back in New York State, they're saying that none of the schools should be using native mascots or names, and if they don't, then they will lose funding. So now they're changing. Now they're changing their names. with the warriors, the braves, and all these things with the mascot images. And so I guess, but things are changing. Things are happening. But each nation has its own opinion on that also. So we have to respect that too.
Thank you. Very, very diplomatic answer from someone who's probably an expert in diplomacy. Thank you for that. I sometimes would bring up this discussion with students about so-called Indian mascots and so on, and try to see what their feelings were, why they were committed to a certain feeling, would they consider changing their mind if they knew that people were offended by it and not honored by it, and so on. And one of the things that happened several years ago when I was at an NCAI gathering in Denver, it happened to be right around Halloween time. And so there was a Halloween party just for fun, a social event that night. And so there were a group of Native people who came as the Fighting Whiteys. And they had these ridiculous blonde wigs on and these big white bright tennis shoes, and some of them did their own caricatures of what a white person looked like. Well, it's just basketball. We're just a Fighting Whiteys, we're honoring you. And it was funny and it was perfect. So I asked to take a photo of them. So after we would have these discussions in our class about, well, it's just honoring you. It's nothing. It's no big deal. It's great. It's good. It shouldn't. If you're too sensitive about it, well, then it's your problem. So then I would pop up the slide on the big screen of the Fighting Whiteys. And many students would immediately get offended. And I think, well, what are you doing? That's no big deal. It's just a game. It's no problem. It's just the name of a ball team. But that one photo really turned their thoughts around for many students. It opened their eyes. So I think of the Fighting Whiteys whenever the mascot question comes up. All right, here's another question. And this is Onondaga Nation's position, but of course as leader of the Haudenosaunee, and again, this might be you might answer this in a way that reflects diversity of views. What is the Onondaga Nation's position regarding equality of LGBTQ folk or their role? And can you discuss? And maybe this would be traditional belief system versus, some sort of general opinions today or something.
Yeah, we're seeing more of that in our communities, and I've asked elders, have you ever heard of any kind of discussion on this? And of course, we've had these what I call gay persons in the communities.
LGBTQ.
Yeah, and I don't believe they were shunned or banished or anything. They were kind of just accepted the way they were, and I guess it's something that is coming into some of our like our social dances and ceremonies, and it has been coming up. I've discussed it with other nations where they've had okay, so what do we do? What do we do in these situations? And it was just recently a young girl wanted to change her name. She was graduating out of our elementary schools, and we dress the kids make their own outfits and traditional outfits, and the girls making the dresses and the boys making the leggings and what the men wear. And this young lady didn't want that. She wanted to have the boys' outfit, and the ones that helped, they really didn't know what to do. We didn't want to offend. We knew this was happening in some families, and I think what they ended up was she just ended up having a shirt, and I don't know I wasn't there when they had the last ceremony, or the graduation. I think it was last year. Mm-hmm. But there's I have no real acknowledgement of that within our our peoples, and anybody talking about it as far as a policy towards that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I know sometimes we'll get a call or a question from a student or something who's read a little bit about the concept of a person being two-spirit and wanting to apply that belief system to all tribes, to all nations. And I usually say, you know, there's a lot of diversity of thought, and I wouldn't use a broad brush to discuss something as important as traditional belief systems. So anyone else with a question? Hi, John Nakashima. This is a boy from... It's a boy from my hometown of Dubuque, Iowa. His dad was a family doctor, took my brother's tonsils out, and we live about 3 blocks away from each other now in Morgantown.
Well, let's see. So you might not know that we're surrounded by poverty. I mean, West Virginia is one of the poorest states. Morgantown's just, you know, not like the rest of the state. It's a very poor state. We always say, thank God for Mississippi. And I noticed that you're really interested in stopping fracking. They frack here. Fracking is extensive in West Virginia, and they actually frack across from our water plant in this very city. And I just wanted to hear your views on fracking.
Yeah, it became an in New York, and there was a big grassroots movement to stop fracking. Our concerns were that we have our own water system. We have a tower that provides water to the whole community, but our aquifer was off the reservation line, and we heard about these people coming into our area getting these leases from these farmers, and they said we heard about that they were drilling doing this fracking, and it could contaminate the aquifers. So we thought right away that this is going to be, we can't protect that out there because it's off the reservation. So we joined in there with a lot of the citizens of New York, trying to keep fracking out of New York State and in our areas. But it was, I know it's in Pennsylvania and other states. It's just the people that we, you know, they did the organization, and we supported them, and we were able to get I think it's a moratorium right now on fracking in New York. But it was a huge effort from the citizens, and we certainly supported that action.
Thank you, Tadodaho. Thank you for the good questions from the audience.